Last week, the demos talked about 1.7. I think we reviewed a few PRs and issues. Today we have demos.
I have a demo about SMS and then a couple topics.
And David has demos.
I have interactive mode in UI testing.
Topics to look at 1.7. And more topics apparently. Status. Let's start with status. Vulture 1. We haven't launched anything. Vulture core. So from 8.8. This one. Button size. OpenIddict 4.7.0 update. AspNetCore 7.0.10 update. .NET 7 and .NET 6 updated. When was that? GraphQL types to the SEO module from Daniel. So now we can query the SEO properties from GraphQL. Data, Open Graph, Twitter, all these things now are exposed in GraphQL. It's great. Use display text to help to generate title patterns. So the previously suggested template was not configurable enough, so it was directly using display text. And so Mike suggested to use the display text filter, because instead of just getting the property display text of a content item, the filter will be clever and check if this content item has a custom way of getting the display text, which is not the property display text. If it's the display text property, then it will use that. Otherwise, it will use something else. If the content item has, for instance, what's the name? Custom metadata. What's the name? That metadata. What's the thing? I named it. No. What's the thing that we implement for content items? Aspect. Yeah. Okay, so if it has a custom aspect to provide a display text, then it will use that. What else? That's it. Hello, customization behavior of full text search in user UI. Yeah, that's new PR.
Yeah, we did similar thing to the content UI, and this is for the users UI, where you can now define a different filter by default.
search UI improvements. Remove handcoded error in your screen. Well,
This view is just an old view that we no longer use. But these are the hard-coded views right there, the errors, because these errors are defined in the driver or the controller. It's in the model state. So, we just display whatever the model state provide us instead of hard-coding it, which overrides a model state error.
see, because the fact that we specify this text, it will use this text instead of the one sent for username.
Correct. We should never hard code these errors in the views, because otherwise whatever the model state contain will not be displayed.
But in this case, where is it?
It's in the model, in the user manager. So whenever we make an update, or create a user, the model, the user manager process the notification and returns user or identity result. So the identity result is what prints to the.
But we don't own the user manager. So is it really user manager?
In the controller, if you look at the controller, we use the user manager to update or create the user, and that validates the users. Like it'll tell you, hey, the username is already exists, or the email already exists. Right, there's validations.
Yeah, I don't understand User information, display driver. Okay. And this one will show edit username model, username edit, username edit. So it will render this shape with these two models. Edit username model. Here. It update. Create models. Try update model. Username model. Email model. Try update model. So the model text editor will have the errors for these models. Yes, so that's the I think that's a problem. So where is the string that is displayed now?
So if you go to the controller where we call the display user manager, what we do, we build the user and then we pass it to the user manager. The user manager processes the result, it does a validation and returns identity result, which tells us the errors, which is, goes to the model state.
Okay. So does it mean that this view doesn't render anything?
No, it renders the error that is returned by the user manager.
But this view returns the error, the validation error for the property username.
Correct.
This view returns the validation error for the email.
For the email, correct.
Yeah. And the controller can't do that. It can't say this is the error for the email property. This is the error for the username property, because this is driven by the view model that is the view model which you get here, but which is here. So this view model, for instance, it contains the property email and everything. And so you remove that, right? Or is it what you remove? Okay, so you didn't remove that thing.
Correct, because that will be added if the user submit the form without a value.
So the text is coming from this attribute. In
this case, yes. But also if you're trying to, for example, if you create a new user, right, with a valid value, so it passes that validation. Then what you do, you pass that users to the user manager to create a user.
Okay.
Then the user manager is going to check that value. Hey, does that value exist or belong to a different user? And if it does, it's going to give you another error, a different error saying.
But that is different from that validation here. And
no, it's the same. It's the same rendering. It's the same message, though.
This property here, the message that will be displayed by this thing, this one, the line 8 of user email edit, before it was rendering, the email is invalid for this property. Now it will render, and it was taking the text from this file here, line 8. Now it will take the value that will be displayed here is no more this string. It will be
whatever the model state tell you it is.
It will be either invalid, it will be invalid email, or
an email already exists, or email required. Correct. It could be that the email exists, right? Or the email belonged to a different user.
But this email belongs to a different user is not the thing that will be displayed here, line 8. It will be something else from a different component than user email edit or username edit. Probably from the view that the controller is returning that will render the model errors from the controller, not from the driver. This is even if only one line appears, it's not from this line 8 here or this line 8 here. It's a different thing. Before, you might have seen the username is required, but what you were seeing in your controller was not this string here, even if they were the same. Or maybe before it was saying the email is invalid, but what you thought was saying the email is invalid was not this string here, but something else. So
yeah, but when you hard code the code there, it will always render what you see in the view.
Yes,
not the model state.
But if there is an issue with the model binding of the user email edit, or in this case, if there is an issue with the model binding of username edit, what you change here is that when there is an issue in this step, which is model binding of this view model in the driver, not in the controller, then instead of rendering this text here translated, it will render this text, which might be the same. Okay, so in this case, not the same. Invalid email, the email is invalid. Okay, it's not the same. But there is an error with that. There is an issue with that. Maybe it is that it's possible that we did that because this way it's translated with a source that appears to be the view where it's displayed. So it's easy to track and to translate. Now, by removing that, I assume it will pick up this message here, which is a string from the view model. I like to know if the PO extractor is able to extract these and associate it to this file, and also that the localization will intercept the attribute and localize this message. That I'm not sure. I know
so I am trying right now, and these kind of strings are taken into account by the PO extractor.
Okay. So the PO extractor reads that, but then do we have the services that will actually translate these on rendering? I know Hisham did something like that. There is a like attribute something. So we have to check that. Okay, so that's my only concern.
You know, the issue if we hard code, so if we go back to where the old code, right, where it's hard coded, and you create a user and the email exists, the actual error message is because the email exists. You can't create that user.
Interesting.
Right? But if we don't, it will show the email invalid, which makes no sense because you know the email is valid, but the actual error is that the email already exists. So instead of displaying the email exists, in this case, you'll show when the email is invalid, which is just bad feedback.
That's weird that this shape here is taking over the controller. Yeah, so the controller, what's the name of the controller?
Admin controller and the users, I believe.
Yeah, and sorry, on the second thought, it's not taken into account. The PO extractor cannot find this kind of strings in a view model. The translation from the views have been removed, but the ones from the view model.cs, they are not added. No.
Okay, so and this one here, just want to understand why it's overriding the one from the overview. So you say, well, so when, for instance, you create a user, Okay, so play post. We can view shape. Okay. Excellent. So user display manager, entity editor. Yeah, I think the problem is in this method, not in the current view.
So if you look at the user service, you'll see where we add the error. So we put, if it's an invalid user, we add the error there. You see that method on line 314 when it creates, that's what adds the error to the model state.
This one. User service. User service. This is this one. Process validation error. Report error, but that's an action here. Oh, add further error. Okay. Then state add error. So we have a custom method there. No, it's not a custom. It's the method that takes the error. Okay.
Line 249 here. You scroll down till you'll see where, right there.
Okay.
You see how we add the key with the specific error.
And the email here. Okay, that's
yep.
So okay, so this works. This is inslatable. This is all correct here. So the issue is a bad assumption that this thing here, error message, not in this file, but the ones that still exist, will be used because it won't be used. In this case, at least. And it won't be translated. So this file here.
If we don't have a way to translate the data attribution, then we shouldn't be using them here. Instead, in the controller, we should check if it's blank. If it's empty, then we add the error using the string.
Yeah, I would have expected it works, but at some point we made it working. So I don't know the status, but this is confusing because in this case here, that won't be used. And it's not even extracted by the PO file. So maybe in other cases it's used, but you have to check where this thing is model bound. And
maybe what we can do is just remove that line 8 and 9 and move that validation into that driver, and that will take care of it.
Oh, I found it in the POT file.
So it's there.
It should be okay. Yeah.
So we extract that value?
Yeah. I was wondering because I saw a removed lines.
But there is a new line in the file, edit user email. Oh no, it was already there, but we don't know which one is used. Okay. Yeah, we need to understand if it's actually localized when we render it, and probably. Yeah, maybe we need to keep it because the controller will add its own values, but in some other cases, this is this value that will be used. So that might be just okay. Right, you see this email address validation. Is there an email address validation here? I don't think so.
No, there isn't.
Oh, invalid email. There is invalid email, but the service itself does that. Maybe
correct.
This validation here is different from the ones that does that here. So that would be nice to see, Mike, if you can test to now make this fail, not because the email is invalid due to that check, but because the email is invalid due to that check here, just to trigger this exact attribute failure, just to see if the text appears somewhere, and change the text to some real value, right? Okay, that was interesting. Okay. Next one, updated and version StyleCop.Analyzer or StyleCop.Analyzers. And when I saw this PR, I checked what is that thing compared to Roseville Analyzer compared to FXCop. So apparently they are just NuGet packages to enable StyleCop rules. And it will read that. When I saw that Sam Howell was contributor, the maintainer for this library, I'm like, okay, that's a good library. Still wait an exception in the background. What that must be chunky. I was like, these kind of things, like what? Volume delay. Where is it used now? Was it's used there? Oh, it's there now. Okay. Yeah, HttpContext in the background. Yeah, that's just for my wanted to be able to run stuff in the background. So now.
Yeah, no, not yet. This is just nope. That's not it. That's not going to do that.
Oh, it's cleaning. It's the next step. Okay.
Yeah.
Configure MvcOptions. Okay. I'd like to know why. Why?
We should be just configuring. We shouldn't be adding MvC. Adding MvC will add more services, which is something we add into the startup file of the MvC project. And typically we configure the options just like that. That was the only instance where I did it. So I undid my work. So
okay, good. Demos. Mike, want to start because you're first in the list.
Sure. Let me share. Share. I'll share right there. All right. See my screen, right?
Yep.
Okay, so based on interest, few people that, and we had a convo about SMS last week. So I implemented an SMS module. So this module provides you a way to have SMS services into your project, and then you can do whatever it is that you want with them. So there's actually 3 features around it, and I'll show you all. So if you go in here and you search for SMS, you'll see a new feature here called SMS. So if you enable it, I don't know why it kicked me out. It doesn't matter. I think it just rebuild the container. So now I have a setting here. Yeah, it didn't enable it. SMS. Yep. Okay, now it's enabled. So if I go under settings, you'll see a new option called SMS. If you click it here, you'll be able to configure your provider. So if you click on the available providers, there's 2. There's one called console, which is because I'm in a debug mode. I actually can select the console, and any message that is sent through the SMS provider will just be printed in the console. This is for debugging, and this is only something available if you're in dev mode. If you're in production, you can implement your own provider, but by default, we're providing you Twilio. Twilio is probably the most commonly used service. When you click Twilio, you'll be able to actually configure it. So those information are coming from your Twilio account, the phone number from Twilio account, your account SID from Twilio, and then the authorization token. So with this, you can now pretty much use the SMS feature into your project. And also part of the documentation, it shows how we can easily add any new implementations. Let me go and show you the PR real quick with the docs, but you can simply add any implementation that you want for any other services, and that would so if you go, you'll see there's some screenshots here, but if you go down, there's an example somewhere. I wrote it. Okay, right here. So you can actually implement it just like that. You can have your own implementation and just register it. Just one line of code, and you'll have your own implementation registered. So this is the SMS module. So to kind of build more on top of it, I added a couple more features. The other feature is, with around 2-factor authentication. So how can we deliver the 2-factor authentication code through the SMS feature? So there's another feature in here called 2-factor SMS method, and that's another method that's available for 2-factor. As you can see here, there's a 2-factor email method. There's 2-factor authentication app or authenticator app method. But if you enable this method here, you'll be able to go to your security settings now, and you will see a new option here for the SMS authentication. With this, you can change your phone number, so you can have whatever phone number and request it, and you'll get a verification code that you would have to apply, and then it will change your authentication. Also, with this feature, if we go to security settings and login settings under the authentication provider, there is an option here, the SMS authenticator setting, which allows you to define a message with Liquid support, the message that you want to generate that goes out to the user. The third feature with SMS is the SMS notifications. So we already have a notifications module available. So with SMS notification, you can actually deliver notification through SMS. So if you enable this and you go to your user profile, you will see another notification method here, which is called SMS notification on the top of an email authentication. And then the user can opt in or opt out. And all these features utilize the SMS module. So that PR is available here. It is also ready. There's some screenshots that I provided. of everything that, workflow. Right. So if you enable workflow, I also added an event that allow you to deliver SMS to the workflow, which is kind of cool. If you're building a message here, you can either notify using the notification, which is right here, the notify user message. You can use that to deliver a notification. But then also, this is not new, by the way. What's new is that you can actually add an SMS. So you'll send SMS message directly using a workflow. That is all for this demo. Questions?
Did you mention the notifications?
Yeah, the notifications. Yeah, there's a feature I mentioned,
Okay.
SMS notification, which integrates with the existing notifications module.
It's that part. Thank you. Great. So, are there any questions? Oh, yes. One about the localization. And thank you. So next, David.
Right. Okay, so I want to show off that as some of you probably know, we have the UI testing toolbox by Lombiq, which lets you do UI testing. And one problem that I have found occasionally, but in that time when that happens, it's really annoying, is that basically the Orchard core process and the UI testing process runs in the same app. So the two things run in the same process. So you can't actually just pause testing and continue running the web application itself if you want to try things out. So for that, I have added this. I've created a method that goes to switch to interactive. And what it does is that if you run the test, now you're able to pause at that point. It's kind of like the spiritual equivalent of debugger. Oh, is it starting? Yeah, it's just so okay. So like going into the debugger from code, but it's not going into the debugger. It actually just pauses the test thread, so you can still interact with this, and opens up a separate tab where it tells you what is going on. And then, for example, if you want to, one use case, for example, is to go to admin in a new tab. And then in this test, in this test, we added a bunch of content items. So, for example, you want to check that this one has all the data, or it has the data you expect. Then you can do it now. You can edit stuff, which wouldn't be good for you for testing, but maybe you want to check something just in case, or check your configuration if your features are enabled as expected, that kind of stuff. So once you're done with your things, you can just close this by clicking continue test, and then it, as the name says, continues the test. And if you didn't mess with the initial window, the first tab where the test is going to run, or in this case, this method navigates to a new tab, new location in the tab anyway, then it will seamlessly continue. And once you feel like everything works as expected, you can remove it and your debug session is concluded. And how it works is really just uses the shortcuts, Lombiq Test UI shortcuts module, and it just displays this view and has a simple boolean as a singleton service registered. So you update this using controller actions. And the actual method that you invoked here, what it does is it opens that tab and then just continuously invokes the API method, which just accesses the status variable and then returns it as JSON. So yeah, it's just a small thing, but it can be a lifesaver, because otherwise, what can you do? Like insert task delay with some random value and then be stressed about it. That's not very good. And I have used it since in live debugging, so it is actually practical.
Yeah,
I think that's it.
It looks like you've been there.
Yeah.
And you had to implement something to help you test the site with data. I have one comment on the implementation. It's a stupid thing, I will say, but if you look back at your interface that you showed us with the enable property, I don't think you need an interface. It's totally fine to just create a class, interactive node status accessor, with no interface. Just register the class directly and resolve the class directly. Because I'm pretty sure that you will never, ever have a different implementation than the interactive models that you get to solve.
Yeah, that's true. It's kind of enterprisey.
And in HttpCore, we
the good thing about
everywhere.
that approach is that you don't have to think about if it should be or not, shouldn't be, and faster code reviews, that kind of stuff. So I don't mind it, but yeah, I agree, it's technically not necessary.
But yeah, in HttpCore, we implemented too many interfaces also for things that we know, just for abstracting for sure, maybe for testing also, but sometimes when you don't need to mock it, to re-implement it, the interface is too much. So just in this case, that's typically an example where, but yeah, for consistency, as you said, like, why is this one doesn't have an
Yeah,
interface?
also a cool thing that we have the Lombiq analyzers pre-configured with a role that forces you to document all interfaces. So if I just create a class, then I don't have to document it and be lazy, and that's not good.
The analyzer should tell you if the class is public, then it should have documentation. Otherwise, you just make it internal or private, and then you don't have to document it, because if it's internal or private, it means there must be a public interface that has documentation. But if it's
but you don't usually like document models, for example, and those kind of have to be public.
Then you should. Why? Like you have documentation on your public property here enabled. Why not on the model? It's the same
because
reason.
in most cases the models, they are kind of
if you have
self-explaining.
If you have a reason to document a property on an interface, then the same reason, whatever you tell me, you apply it to the property on the model. Whatever the reason is, like you want it or you like chocolate, whatever, is the same thing. So yeah, if it's public, it's documented.
I see you feel strongly about this.
And and in the AspNetCore repository, that's also a way for us to not have to write documentation. We just make the thing private. It reminds us that, okay, doesn't make sense to write documentation, so this must be private. Like nobody should care about what, public documentation. Like code comments, fine, but public documentation for API documentation. That's why we put things private and we don't forget about putting things private. Like your implementation here, you showed me it was public, maybe it should be private or internal. You just want to expose the interface.
I see.
Yeah. Well, experiences diverge and you have different reflexes and rules. That's okay. Thank you, David, for that.
Yeah, thanks for your time.
That's more work for Gabor to publish stuff. That's okay. Good. I will share the screen just if we have topics.
Yeah, I want to talk about an issue that I'm having. Hopefully you'll have the solution. And there's another PR that you wanted to talk about today. You mentioned that last Thursday.
Issue PR, go.
So issue 1.4, well, the first one. So I'm trying, so I have a module with a view, but when I put it on NuGet, for some reason, it does not include my compiled views as I would expect it. Because every time I run that NuGet package into another project, I get an error stating that the shape doesn't exist. So the view in my module that is on NuGet can't seem to include views. If you scroll down, there is one line that I kind of don't understand in Orchard, where we register the AddRaiser runtime compilation. So it seems like we only inject or AddRaiser runtime compilation is only if there's a folder called the refs. And I don't know what actually create those refs. I'm guessing because that refs folder doesn't exist, the AddRaiser compilation doesn't get registered, and my project does not include the compiled views. That's my assumption. I could be wrong.
In your project, CS project, you can add enable Raiser compilation. That might be what you miss.
Do we need to do it if we're including?
Remember, like 2 weeks ago, we mentioned PR from Isham that was removing this CS project in the themes because these themes, they didn't have any view. And he said, because we don't have any view, we don't need this line. And Chantier said, yeah, but in case, because the day you have a view, then it won't work. But I said, well, we won't have a view in this team, so it's fine to remove it. But it's probably the thing that you're missing here.
So every module that we want to pack, we have to add AddRaiser runtime compilation in that module?
No, it's an application thing. But I understand that what I just said was about the thing. Interesting. So try that. Maybe that's the thing actually. And you see here, there is nothing, and we think should need Razor support for MvC. So try to add that to see if it's fixing your issue. And I hope not.
Oh, I hope it does.
Well, I hope if it does, then we will have to keep it and to document it. But let's try that. And otherwise, ping your theory because you will know definitely. Okay, so try that.
So we need to add that to. We don't need that AddRaiser support for MvC. That,
I
or
think
at least
we don't
think.
But I should know. Well, in this case, in these projects, we don't have MvC views. We don't have Razor views. But in yours, you have some. So try to add that to your project.
Yeah, that one I have, but I just don't. I don't have the compilation because of that ref folder doesn't exist.
The compilation. is in the project. It's at the project level, isn't it?
It'll be the web project, you mean? The startup project?
This one. So in our one, we have false. Try to put true in yours. But it might be another issue that the NuGet package doesn't have the compiled views for the shapes. So just ping Jean-Thierry and just say that, just to see if it's normal.
Okay.
Yeah, because that should work. That's a common demonstration that we do. Or maybe we were compiling locally. Okay, so next you said
there's another PR
Yeah.
we looked at last Thursday, and you said you want to demo or discuss it here. So I put a screenshot in there. That one, make general settings page extensible. Yep, that one. So to kind of give a quick preview, so the page setting currently, the way how we have it, it's that tabs are hard coded instead of utilizing the tabs in shapes. So what I did in this PR is I moved the hard coded tabs out, and I used the shapes, the tabs placement in shapes to create the tabs. So the output is the same. However, the advantage with this new approach is that you could potentially, if you want to add a new tab to your general settings, now you can.
So the difference is that before there was a controller, now it's just based on drivers and aggregation of UI using a custom type. The same way you do that for users, the custom user setting. You have the
we don't. It's not a controller. Before we actually had driver, but the driver we had one view that creates or hard codes the tabs. And so what I did is I removed the hard coding, created tabs, as you can see, using the tab placement, and that created the tab for me, which is the same output. But now, if I want to create my own tab into that page, I can. Or if I want to add, some new site-based settings, I want to put it there instead of having to create a new menu item for that. It doesn't really change what we have, but it just makes that page extensible. And yes, we have a custom settings that you can module that you can add custom settings.
This thing now is moved into the shape.
Yep.
So you can even change the visibility of the shape. Okay, that's good. And then you can add more drivers, 12 more tabs.
Yep. So same settings, same layout, same everything, except it's just extensible.
It's split. Yep. Okay. And split it to different things. Okay. Okay, so 1.7, we started a branch. We updated the translations on Thursday. On the branch, we are pointing to a new translation, and it's working, it's building. I started the functional test this morning on this branch. Doesn't work with MySQL, so it's not related to translations, but we have to fix that. And we did some changes recently about MySQL, but maybe it's not that one on one. Okay, it's an issue with the recipe that we are using for MySQL, probably other container that we are setting up in the Docker, for the functional test. So we have maybe need to fix the functional test themselves. So it looks good. So we can ship. Oh, but we have an issue. We found an issue probably. 1.7 milestones. It's a login settings that found missing. We need a migration step for this issue that will convert the site settings to the new model. That's a breaking change. So we need to change the JSON document in a migration and fix the functional test. And we can ship the translations and point to the news package, this new package, and we get translations. Good. On time. Perfect. Thanks, everyone. See
Thank
you
you.
on Thursday. Bye-bye.
Bye, man.
Right.